Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia here, back with you with my friends Diante Lee and Steven Ruiz. Good to have you watching on FanDuel TV or listening on Spotify. We are down to 4. We are down to 4 championship teams after 2 very good games on Sunday. Both games come down to the wire late in the fourth quarter. Bills hang on 27-25 against the Ravens. Eagles hang on 28-22 against the Los Angeles Rams. So we have Bills Chiefs in the AFC, and we have Eagles Commanders, just as everyone expected in the NFC. 2 of those 4 teams will be playing in the Super Bowl in New Orleans. Diante Lee, how are we doing after the ups and downs and craziness and wildness of those 2 games on Sunday?
Without sounding like I'm coping to the maximum degree, I am tired of weather being an influence on football games. Wow. And I don't want to start. I'm not starting there. I'm just saying it was just so hard to watch today. Before we even get into the action, it was so hard to watch today and not just see how much the cold, wet conditions clearly played a role in how the flow of the game went. But this was exactly what you would want out of divisional round matchups, right? You got a lot of drama. There's a lot to talk about coming out of these games. And at least in the second game, we got to see 2 high-level quarterbacks under stressful environments. And I think there's a lot to talk about with how they responded to it.
Spoken like a San Diego kid, Ruiz. I mean, you had to enjoy a little snow football, right, or no?
No. I'm on record as saying I'm anti-weather. Build a dome for all 32 stadiums. I do not want these games ruined by weather. Like if it's a Bears-Browns game, sure, snow all over that game, ruin that game because it was going to be bad either way, but like not for our playoff games. I want neutral, not neutral field, but domes for every stadium, at least in the playoffs. I'm happy Buffalo is building a dome stadium. Good riddance.
I like a little snow football. We got a little snow football. I hear what you're saying. You might not get the results you're expecting in snow football. You have to adjust. It's part of the game. I'm old school. What do you want from me? All right, we got to start with Ravens-Bills. We talked about it last week. It was going to be a legacy game for a quarterback. There would be narratives coming out of this thing. Bills go up early, up 21-10 at halftime. Ravens storm back. Lamar Jackson puts together an outstanding drive. They're down 27-19, 3:23 left. They go 88 yards down the field just when you're thinking, yes, give us the classic. We're going to OT, or at least we're going to see Josh Allen have to answer. Mark Andrews drops the 2-point attempt in his hands, ends the game 27-25. I feel like we are a little bit robbed of a great ending. Ruiz, you have been on both of you have been, but Ruiz, we'll start with you. You have been on the sort of Ravens bandwagon since the preseason. Your Super Bowl pick, hung with them all season long. And it's a weird game because, again, I think there are going to be storylines and narratives coming out of this that I don't know that I necessarily agree with. I think that you probably won't necessarily agree with. So how do you cope with this, to use Deontay's word, when you're looking at the Ravens falling short of the Super Bowl?
I mean, if you're looking at it from the perspective of Lamar Jackson, and like that's why I like to root for this Ravens team. I like Lamar Jackson. I enjoy watching him play football. The rest of the team, like I take it or leave it, honestly, especially Mark Andrews. It's always Andrews. Do you know what made me mad was Tony Romo after the early Andrews drop being like, that's uncharacteristic of Mark Andrews. Have you ever watched Mark Andrews play before? That he at the catch point, he's liable to drop any pass that comes his way. But like it's easy to come through it from like a Lamar Stan perspective because he averaged over 9 yards per drop back. He beat Josh Allen in like the efficiency metrics in terms of passing to 45% success rate to a 35% 0.12 EPA per dropback compared to negative 0.07 for Allen. The Ravens didn't punt the football once. They had an interception where him and Bateman are on a different page. Bateman cuts off the route. Lamar thinks he's going to run a vertical route. You throw an interception. I thought it was a bad decision either way, to be honest with you. So I'd put that on Lamar either way. Yep. And then the fumble, I thought that was just Lamar trying to do too much / it was the snow. And I don't think he would fumble that in normal weather conditions, but he did. And he had 2 turnovers. So it's going to be something we're going to have to talk about and we're going to have to deal with. But outside of that, he was brilliant in this game. Considering the conditions, considering the weather, considering the stress that Diante alluded to, considering the game pressure in the second half, coming out down 21-10. Like that's the script that we all said Lamar couldn't play in the playoffs, like earlier on, like the critics for Lamar were saying that. And he not only led them back in that game, it looked kind of easy with Lamar back there. Like he was making plays, he was buying time. The Bills couldn't get pressure on him, but I think that was because they were afraid of Lamar Jackson as a scrambler. So like I'm coming away from this feeling pretty good about Lamar going forward, and I think the discourse won't be nearly as bad as it would have been if he didn't lead that comeback at the end. It's disappointing, but I mean, it was two good quarterbacks controlling the game at the end.
If you're a Ravens fan, though, Diante, you have to be like, how is it still not happening for us? Like, if it didn't happen this year, I think we all talked about it. They looked like the most complete team coming into the playoffs. And in this game, they have 3 turnovers. Ruiz talked about all of them right there. They outgained the Bills 416 to 273. And it's just like an uncharacteristic game. I mean, they only had one other game this entire season where they had more than 1 turnover, and that was their loss to the Steelers in the midway point of the season. And then in this game, like Ruiz said, they don't punt, but they turn the ball over 3 times. That's really the game. It's so boring. Like, I get annoyed when I turn on a pregame show, all turnovers. I'm like, yeah, we all know that, obviously. But sometimes it is true. Sometimes it is true. You look at this game, and that ends up being the difference. So if you're a Ravens fan, is it just like, all right, bad luck on this day? Is it, man, we got to change X, Y, and Z? How do you cope with this so that one of these seasons you're getting over the hump, or do you just keep knocking at the door and hoping one of these years it's your year?
I mean, again, I feel like I've said this 3 or 4 times. So much of this just feels like Peyton Manning before he turned 30. It just seems like you're just continually bumping your head up against this ceiling of not being able to execute in these high stress situations. And I would take the other side for Steven. To me, I think this is maybe the most frustrating kind of performance that could have happened from a Lamar legacy discourse perspective, because those 2 turnovers, I think, are going to take such an outsized proportion of the conversation, and rightfully so, right? I would say, especially for the fumble, those are just the kinds of plays that cannot happen, right? You just think about the ways that Baltimore has exited the postseason the last few years, and a lot of it has been on the back of plays just like that, where you're driving, it looks like you're finding a rhythm, you're balanced on offense, it looks like you have figured some things out, especially for them in the first half, because I thought that Buffalo did a good job of borrowing from some defensive game plans that we've seen thrown at Lamar in this offense in past weeks that have worked or have bothered them. They loaded up the line of scrimmage the way that Cincinnati did earlier in the year to try to bother them with some cover 0 looks, trying to manufacture unblocked pressure. We talked about when they lost to the Steelers in their first game, about their under center run game and how defensive tackles and linebackers are just teeing off when they're under center, and that those guards are struggling in those environments. I thought that Buffalo borrowed from a lot of the things that forced Baltimore into a hole, and then on the whole, you're able to come out and say Lamar Jackson overcame those things. He was great from the pocket. He was a wizard on 3rd down. This is one of the best 3rd down performances you're going to see from a quarterback in a playoff environment. He was able to lift their ceiling so often. But when you go back and watch those 1st and 2nd down plays where you do get the sacks, you do have these missed opportunities, you do have those drops, there are going to be a lot of people who are conflating those things, all those things, as Lamar issues, when the truth of the matter is that a miscommunication on a route and then just his bad ball security on the fumble is really just at the heart of it. And that means less time talking about what he was in the second half, which was clearly the best football player on the field and somebody who could have won if they were able to convert late in the game.
I do think the game ultimately came down to what we discussed on the previous show, and that was like which team was going to be able to win without putting too much on their quarterback, without asking their quarterback to put on the cape. Like, the one thing you could quibble with the Ravens' performance, like obviously on the offensive side, they were good outside of the turnovers, but on the defensive side, they couldn't stop the run. The Bills had a 61% success rate on the ground, averaged nearly 0.2 EPA per run. Those are like MVP passing numbers this season. So that was ultimately what lost them the game outside of the turnovers. And we didn't ever see Josh Allen have to press. He didn't have to elude a pass rusher and kind of hold himself up with one arm and fumble the football like that. Like, I feel like Lamar's turnovers were the result of playmaking pressure that he kind of put on himself. And like, if Josh Allen won this battle in any way, it's that he didn't make those mistakes. He didn't press. Yep. But the Bills offense made it so much easier for him not to do that, just because of not only like their success on the ground, because Baltimore had that success on the ground, but their play calling. Like, even when they called drop back passes for Allen, his ADOT in this game was just over 5, whereas Lamar's was over 10 in the snow. Like, that's not what you want to see. So I thought the game was just a little bit easier for Josh Allen, and to his credit, he didn't press and make it harder than it had to be.
I mean, Buffalo's top 2 games in terms of success rate on the ground have both come in the postseason. So that to me says that this team has kind of hit its stride with being able to control the line of scrimmage. They've been able to control game script. They were obviously given a gift from Baltimore in terms of being able to get an advantage in the game script. But once they had it, I mean, they bullied Baltimore up front with their offensive line, running the ball. They were able to manage down and distance situations. And every time, to Steven's point, where you think, all right, this might be the drive where Buffalo's going to have to lean on Josh Allen a little bit more, they stay in those down and distance situations where you don't have to ask him to do more than what's necessary. And to me, I think that that's what's probably going to be really frustrating on the defensive side for Baltimore, because they did a lot of the things that I wanted to see them do. They played tight coverage. They made it really difficult. Outside of that deep pass to Khalil Shakir in Tampa 2, there really wasn't a lot of airspace for Allen to work with that weren't checkdowns or drag routes. And that's how you wanted to play this offense. They were just behind the 8-ball, which allowed Buffalo to shrink possessions. And the fact that they could not get enough splash plays on first downs in terms of stuff in the run, getting a TFL, trying to put this team behind the sticks, forcing holding penalties, meant that Buffalo could kind of dictate the terms. No matter how much of a comeback effort Lamar was putting up on the other side, you knew that the next time he got the football, his back was still going to be up against the wall because they were just able to run the clock.
Yeah, let's take a break. I want to come back. I do want to talk more about the quarterbacks, talk more about the Bills, their style of play, because it's funny listening to you guys talk about Josh Allen and the Bills, and I agree. It is very different from sort of the Bills, the version of the Bills we've sometimes talked about in the past, where we're talking about not making mistakes and being methodical. So take a break. We come back. Let's talk more about that. We're back on the Ringer NFL show. So yeah, this is one of those where the box score and the nerd numbers on the Bills are very different. To your point, you would look at this and say, Josh Allen threw for 127 yards. They ran for 147, but they averaged 4.1 yards per carry. But Ruiz is right. This was a 96th percentile game based on rushing success rate. So this was, I don't know if it's death by a thousand cuts or whatever it is, but it was very methodical, picking up first downs. They had 8 possessions, 3 touchdowns, 2 field goals, 3 punts. It was really a don't make the mistake that allows the Ravens to kind of get back in this game, especially in the second half. And I was getting a little like, are they being too conservative? Romo was talking about that during the broadcast. And I think their goal was like, we're up by 11. We know we're only going to be able to hold their offense for so long. They're going to score some points. Like, let's make sure we're being methodical and picking up first downs. Even on that last drive, where they faced that tough decision. I don't know. What did you guys think there? I was totally on the fence there, where they have the ball. They can either kick the field goal. It is 3:31 left. They face a 4th and goal from like the 2.5-yard line. They're up 24-19, and they have to decide in that moment, do we go for it, step on their throat, try to score the touchdown and go up 2 possessions, or do we kick the field goal? They kick the field goal there, go up 27-19. But I think that was kind of symbolic of the way they were playing. This wasn't the step on their throat, be aggressive, go for every 4th down. This was like, just don't make the mistake, control the game, and hope we can win it at the end. Diante, what did you think? Because that was a big moment in the game. I mean, if they go for it and don't get it there, Ravens might be walking out of there a winner when you saw how that last drive went.
I can't say that I wouldn't have gone for it there.
I was on the
especially
fence,
with the flow of the game, right? Because Baltimore was moving the ball really well in the second half, and you had to feel like they were going to mount a drive because they had figured some things out, and they weren't getting any pressure on Lamar in the second half and not in the same way that they were in the first half. I think that my buddy Justice Mosqueda made a really good point when he was kind of pining for kicking the field goal, which is that the only way that Buffalo loses in regulation in this game is if they didn't convert on 4th down and you give Baltimore an opportunity to go the length of the field and take the lead. And once that was kind of laid out to me, I was like, you know what? I think that being conservative there, maybe, like you said, it's a toss-up. I can't say right or wrong, but that's a very sensible choice to make, I think, in that situation.
I totally disagree. Like, you have Josh Allen, who's just been pounding them in short yardage situations. I think you have to try to win the game there. And like, you're 3 yards out. If you stop them, they have to drive from the 3-yard line. You don't get a banner for not losing in regulation. Like, I don't think that should be the goal. The goal should be to win the game. And like you said, with the way the game was flowing, I would feel most comfortable with Josh Allen with the ball in his hand, spread out the formation, give him a run pass option like they had been doing all game long. And I feel like you just put that game away, and if you don't, they make them drive 97 yards to beat you. But it ultimately worked out, and in the end, the field position thing didn't even end up being a factor because Baltimore started the next drive at the 12-yard line, but that was out of Buffalo's control when it comes to that decision. So I thought Buffalo got kind of lucky to avoid overtime because of that conservative call, but I still think the best call is keeping the ball in Josh Allen's hand no matter what.
They were definitely influenced by the fact that he just got stuffed on.
Yeah,
1,000%.
I feel
1,000%.
where they're like, man, we just tried this. Do we like it?
But there was like one out of like the last 10 tries.
I know. I hear you. He looked unstoppable. I mean, he was fantastic.
If they're on the 1.5 or the 2-yard line, I think you go. It's so dumb because it sounds so arbitrary to say, but I think if they're a yard and a half out, 2 yards out, you probably go because you feel like even if we fall forward but don't convert, now it's gonna take 99 yards, or maybe you get a holding or a DPI if you try to put together like a run pass option or something like that. I think that because they got stuffed, trying to get cute, I should say. I think that Tony Romo pointed it out well in the broadcast. Of why are you trying to do this like option play to get him off the edge when you could just have Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid get behind him and shove him in the back? You're gonna get 2 yards or just hand the ball off to James Cook because they haven't been able to stop it at any point during the game. I think that they probably cost themselves with the third down play call and maybe put their backs up against the wall from a decision-making perspective. At least the way that Sean McDermott handled it, it made it harder than it needed to be.
Yeah, it's I mean that, and here's the thing. So after that, Lamar gets the ball, and I know there's probably people listening who are like, guys are making excuses for Lamar Jackson. He had 2 turnovers in this game. He had 2 turnovers in the first half. I mean, that was a legacy drive. If he did not put it together there, I think the criticism, you could be like, all right,
1,000%.
Not only did he have 2 turnovers in the first half, but he had the ball in his hands at the end and he didn't come through. I mean, that was an incredible drive. They go 88 yards with 1 timeout. Bateman goes down during the drive. So he's throwing a Tylan Wallace there. He has that incredible second reaction play across his body for 27 yards. He hits Mark Andrews. He just sits back there forever and has 19 yards. I mean, I think one thing we've talked about before is with some of these quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson, it's so hard to come up with a rush plan that makes sense especially in those points in the game. Like it's not just go all out and try to, rip this guy's head off because he might be gone for a long scramble. And you could kind of tell that, I thought, that he had all day back there. And then he finds Likely for the 24-yard touchdown. So 27-yard completion, 19-yard completion, 24-yard completion. And then the 2-point try, he puts it right there. I mean, it really could have been it's so fun. The little things that just shape how we talk about these guys. But that is how I will remember it. I'll be like, all right, had a couple turnovers early, but man, when it was time to, can you persevere and come back and put the team on your back in a tough spot? He did that. He didn't get rewarded for it. So that's I like your comparison, Diante. That's what it feels like. I mean, he's got 2 MVPs. He's done. I mean, the regular season numbers, the doing it without a great supporting. He's done just about everything you can, but he hasn't broken through. He will. I think it's a matter of time.
It's a matter of when.
I mean, he's still young, but man, that is a tough one for the game to end that way for the Baltimore Ravens. So off-season wise, and then I want to hit on Bills Chiefs here, but off-season wise for the Ravens, how do you view this, Ruiz? Are you like they need to do X, Y, and Z? Is this just a strictly run it back with basically the little tweaks here and there, but no wholesale changes? Do you see any glaring needs on the roster, coaching staff, anything? Or is this just kind of like Diante says it, keep knocking on the door and maybe next year the bounces go your way?
I mean, I think you obviously had some issues that popped up throughout the year that I think need to be addressed. Like in the secondary, they obviously had to make some adjustments, and I think they're going to make further adjustments to the roster. I think the pass catching unit, that's always a talking point in Baltimore.
Always. How is it still? It's like the Seahawks. It's not quite. Sorry, it's not the Seahawks offensive line because that stops them. But it does feel like how many years? Yeah, they've tried, but it's still not, I think, where you would like it to be.
And maybe this is naive of me, but I just want to see him make a play for a T. Higgins, a downfield ball winner. If it's not T. Higgins, that type of wide receiver, which we've never really seen for Lamar. We've never seen him have that bigger archetype of receiver. It's usually been the tight ends playing that role. It's been Likely or it's been Andrews. But that changes things. When it's a wide receiver who plays out on the perimeter and affects what you have to do with your safeties and your cornerbacks, that changes the math compared to a tight end who you can kind of just take out of the game just with traffic in the middle of the field, just by putting linebackers and safeties over the middle of the field. So if they could add a piece to the offense, I don't think they need to. Obviously, we've seen them move the football without one. We've seen Lamar Jackson be an MVP quarterback.
It was a historic offense.
Yeah, it's good enough. But if they are going to add to this offense, that's what I want to see, a ball winner on the outside.
They still got Derrick Henry signed under contract for one more year. You know, I'm not going to be the guy who says next year he might fall off with what I just watched this year. It will be his age 31 season. Can he stay healthy? Can Lamar Jackson? That's why when these seasons come around where these guys are healthy in the playoffs, you know, you want to take advantage of it. They were not able to do it though this year.
I really thought they were smart to not go all out to improve the offensive line, even though that looked like a weak spot, just because I feel like they took into account that Lamar does have that effect on pass rushes that you just talked about. And that makes their job easier as pass protectors. That's usually what you splurge to get on your offensive line. You want a pass protector. And I thought the strategy, I think I made this point before the season, I thought they did a good job of making that a nastier offensive line, one that could play downhill, one that could suit Derrick Henry. Because we could talk about Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson as the focal points of that running game. But even tonight, Baltimore averaged more yards before contact than Buffalo did, even though it felt like Buffalo was the one that was, bulldozing along the offensive line. This offensive line in the run game did become, I would say, a formidable unit. And I think you just lean into that, keep investing into this offense, Todd Monken's offense. Hopefully they don't lose Monken, for their sake, because I think year 3 of this offense will look even better no matter what the personnel looks like.
Yeah, that'd be a big deal if Todd Monken gets a head coaching job. You're looking at kind of next year, Henry's last year of his deal. You hold on to Monken, you run it back, and you see what you have next year, making some tweaks.
I have to say Monken passed this test for me. I thought he was one of the people you could have blamed for last year's loss to Kansas City, but I really liked what he did in the second half. I didn't think he was pressing. I thought he would press and kind of just forget about all the other facets of the offense, but I don't think he did. I think he maintained some semblance of balance in a spot where it would have been really hard to.
Yeah, they had that 80-yard drive where, I think they had one completion and it was just Derrick Henry and Justice Hill. And you're like, oh, okay, they're finally getting going here. So I agree with you. Again, it's boring analysis. 3 turnovers and a drop with the game on the line. Or who knows how it goes. And that's offensively. All right, let's take a break. We come back. I want to talk a little bit more about the Bills before we move to the other game. Is this going to be the year? Can they break through and beat the Chiefs and get to the Super Bowl? We're back on the Ringer NFL show. All right, so this version of the Bills, we just talked about it. This wasn't, Josh Allen didn't need to put the cape on and be a hero in this game. Again, throws for 127. I can't believe he only ran for 20 yards. I swear it felt like more than that as I was watching the game, but 10 carries for 20 yards. So not gaudy numbers, but takes 1 sack, doesn't turn the ball over. I don't think he had a turnover worthy play, unless I'm forgetting about a dropped interception. I don't think he came very close to a turnover worthy play. So it's a different version of him, this kind of evolution where if he needs to just go all out and put the team on his back, he can do that, but he doesn't always have to do that. Diante, do you like this version of the Bills offense, maybe compared to previous versions? Now they're against KC, the way they match up with the Chiefs. We're going to get hopefully another classic next weekend. Allen, Mahomes, how do you feel about the Bills' chances?
I would say that this is, at least with the Bills' offense, I would say that this is the first year where I actually feel like they might have a matchup advantage with the way that they play against the Chiefs' defense because of what they do at the line of scrimmage. Not to say that I think they're going to dominate them up front. I just think that they have as good a combination of answers to find things in the run game as they've had at any point in Josh Allen's career. And I think that while it doesn't necessarily have to look like what it did tonight, they laid out a pathway to be able to protect their quarterback. And I think more importantly, keep Steve Spagnuolo from doing the things that bother Josh Allen the most. What you don't want to have is Spags get an opportunity to get in dime, to get into those mugged up looks, to start sending pressure off the edge and mixing up looks and forcing Josh Allen to hold the ball. you want them to be able to operate within those first 2.5 seconds of the progression where you can just dump the ball off quickly, get guys on in mismatches or, with space against their linebackers, or maybe take a couple chances at their safeties. I think if you're able to operate that way, you should feel like, just as you did last year, we're going to be able to get to the fourth quarter with an opportunity to win the football game. And I think that that's good enough when you're talking about beating the Chiefs, knowing how good they are in the postseason. I think for me, the other side of the ball is really where the biggest questions are. Like I said, today, seeing the personality change that Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott took on tonight, that was really encouraging because that lets me know that they're open-minded. They're willing to put together these more bespoke game plans to try to bother the quarterbacks and offenses they're playing against. And they may not need to be as extreme. I think that this defense, at least from a structural spot, is built to try to deal with an offense like the Chiefs, where you're going to get a lot of RPOs, where you're not necessarily where it's not a team that's trying to be explosive all the time. They're going to try to sit on those routes and force Patrick Mahomes to have to beat them as a scrambler. And then that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? Is do you get the splash plays from AJ Epinesa and Greg Rousseau and Von Miller when you need them? They did when they matched up in the regular season. And that ultimately was what the difference was a great Bills offensive showing and just enough pass rush, I think, to be able to bother that offense on conversion downs. And I think that they're going to have to lean upon that again if they want to beat them this time around.
Yeah, we saw the Texans, of all teams, have running success against the Chiefs defense. So, I mean, Buffalo's been running the football well all season long. We saw them run it well against one of the best run defenses in the NFL against Baltimore. So I agree with Diante. I feel like this is the best matchup going into it on paper. But like with the Chiefs, when you're talking about will a team beat the Chiefs? Like, yes is never an option for me. It's either no or maybe. And I'm going to elevate the Bills to maybe after what I saw today. I think the Bills are definitely a maybe, and I wouldn't be surprised if they beat them. But I'm still going to take the Chiefs just because they always win. I don't know what to say. It's boring analysis, but like they always win. Like they always get the breaks. They get the calls. They get the bounces. They have the best quarterback in the world. They have the best quarterback maybe of all time. It's just so hard to pick against them. And then they're playing in Kansas City. But yes, I totally agree with Deontay's point where the key to how Buffalo has set up their offense is it keeps Spags away from Josh Allen. He can't line up in these exotic looks and play with Josh Allen's mind. Josh Allen has taken humongous strides in that regard, but no quarterback can deal with Spags for 60 minutes over and over and over again. That's what Buffalo used to ask of him in the past before they kind of discovered this new formula on offense, which is really protective of Josh Allen. Like if he does win MVP, it's ironic that this is the year that he wins MVP because it's honestly over the last 4 years, it's probably been his easiest job of the 4 years. This
style of play kind of started last year. I mean, if you look at how they played the Chiefs in that playoff game, it wasn't a dissimilar script to kind of how we just saw them play the Ravens here, where it's methodical drives, high success rate, and then they have the field goal miss at the end there. I guess that's just kind of the way they're going to have to play. I mean, it is a very interesting matchup because in some ways they're similar in that they're methodical. It seems crazy to say Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And we're like, be methodical, but that's kind of the way these two offenses play. The Chiefs do it with a very efficient move the chains passing game and the Bills do it with their run game. But otherwise it's very similar. Like both defenses are solid. I wouldn't say either of them, or we're saying they can totally shut down the opponent. I mean, I agree with you guys. It's going to be one of those games where we're probably going to be having a very similar conversation at the end of it. Well, Team X turned the football over here, or had a drop here, or had a missed field goal here. But I think otherwise, I mean, it looks like a very, very even matchup to me on paper. Like I would be surprised if that's more than a touchdown game either way. The Bills, I've had the stat a million times, have only lost by more than a touchdown once in the last 3 seasons, and that was to the Ravens earlier this year. And we know with the Chiefs, they rarely do as well. So Bills got them earlier this season. We get a rematch next week. Winner goes to the Super Bowl. Will Josh Allen be the one to break through and finally get his team to the Super Bowl? Or will we just be talking about once again, this time next week, the Chiefs are back and we weren't sure if they'd get there, and we had 4,000 conversations all season long about it, and here they are. So Chiefs are 1.5-point favorites in this game. So Chiefs are favored to get to the Super Bowl once again, but big test for him, obviously, in Josh Allen and the Bills next week. We'll talk a lot about that game throughout the week here. All right. take a break. We come back. We move to the NFC, where the Eagles hold on against the Rams, came down to the final possession there as well. We'll talk about that game and what's ahead in the NFC. We are back on the Ringer NFL show. Eagles 28, Rams 22 in a snow game in Philadelphia, a bizarre game that had just about everything, had turnovers, did not have a lot of passing on the Eagles side, had some sacks, had a safety, had some Saquon, basically a typical Eagles football game. Diante Lee, do you feel better, the worse, or the same about the Philadelphia Eagles' chances of winning a Super Bowl? Because they're in the NFC Championship now. I can't say of getting to the Super Bowl. They're one win away, but of actually putting together two games here where they are hoisting the Lombardi Trophy in New Orleans. How do you feel about this football team after what you saw today?
No, I don't feel better. I absolutely feel worse about this offense.
Worse? Okay.
I absolutely feel worse about this offense. I went and looked. I mean, their rushing success and passing success were both in the bottom half for them this year. I think that they were 15th in passing success. So you're talking fifth worst on the season. And we have seen some stinkers from this passing game this year. I think that, and this is before you ever even saw the Jalen Hurts knee injury, right, where he kind of gets twisted around, bangs his knee up on the ground, kind of gets twisted up a little bit, and clearly wasn't the same. You get the safety right after that because he's not comfortable with moving around. I just thought that the early downs, all the issues on the early downs was so emblematic of what makes this passing game so frustrating to watch. And it's something that as you're watching him struggle to get the ball out of his hands, I just keep coming back to when it was working in 2022, I thought that Jalen Hurts operated a lot like 2021 and early career Joe Burrow, where, yes, he's going to turn down throws, but it's okay if you're turning down throws if you're taking high variance chances and if you're a great pre-snap processor. That's what's allowed Joe Burrow to continue to step towards being a fringe elite quarterback, is that his pre-snap processing has gotten sharper and sharper each year, and he has not turned down taking chances out of fear of having turnover-worthy plays or putting the ball in harm's way. And that's key for that passing offense in Cincinnati and why they stay viable, even though they don't always get great offensive line play, certainly not to the level of Philadelphia. For Hurts, I guess it's so frustrating because he's turning down throws. He's not always an early scrambler, which is when he's best as a mobile quarterback, which is the look's not there. I'm putting my foot in the ground. First gap I see, I'm going to go get 6-7 yards. And I thought that he did that decently in the first quarter, at least within the opening script. And as the game went on, you just saw less and less of that. And now you're not getting the vertical chances. And we have just seen that continue to disappear from this offense as defenses show more zone looks. It would be different if we were seeing all these bespoke coverages from defenses when they're facing off against the Eagles. You've been getting cover 2 shells sent over A.J. Brown since 2022. Like, this is not new information. You're going to get quarters and 2 high shells because that's all defenses threw at you last season. The entire impetus for changing the offensive structure was to address some of this. And to their credit, the run game now is effectively unstoppable, even when they're not having a good day, because they can pop explosive plays. Even the Jalen Hurts run, the design QB counter run, or that bash run is a reflection of having an answer for when teams throw you light boxes. And when that's working, that's great. This to me is just proof, and everybody knows it. If you're going to lean on the run game to have explosives, the moment it's not there, your offense is going to be totally disjointed. And that's what happened, I thought, in this game. And I think that there's also a conversation that we need to continue to have about Kellen Moore as a play caller, because I just find so often that some of the tent poles in this offense don't communicate with each other. You don't see one play building into the next. You don't see them pick on mismatches the way that I would like to. They go hot and cold too often in both the run and the passing game. So, and these are all the reasons why I don't feel as good about them being a Super Bowl winning team. But like you said, they're a game away. They're playing a team that they split games with, and the biggest reason why they lost the second one was that their starting quarterback got a concussion, and they had ridiculous, end of game execution offensively and defensively. So they're closer to it than I probably am giving them credit for in what I'm saying. I just don't like the style of play. And I think that today was supposed to be a game where they were really supposed to kind of plant their flag that they can dominate a team if they're not in the same weight class as them. And that's not what we saw at all.
I honestly don't even know like how much the snow and the conditions affected their play calling. Like I think that would have been the game that they played in 60-degree weather. Like just run the football, ask Jalen Hurts. Like that's what Jalen Hurts has become right now. He's not like some quarterback who's raising ceilings. He's making $50 million a year, so it's kind of concerning. But he's become a quarterback who's just asked not to make mistakes and give away the football. And like there are still times when he finds opportunities to do so. Like I know he only took the safety, but he threw a pass in a double coverage that easily could have been intercepted in the end zone. He fumbled around midfield, which could have been recovered by either team. It cost him 3 points. It could have cost him more points. So, like, even in that role, he's kind of been shaky. But, like, I just don't think it matters, at least until the Super Bowl. Until they come up against the Chiefs or the Bills, I don't think it's really going to matter because I said this at the beginning of the playoffs. I don't think there's a team in the NFC outside of Detroit, and now Detroit's gone, that can really test them on offense. That's going to force them to play left-handed because the run game is unstoppable now. And Washington's defense is not stopping the run game. Washington's defense is not the thing that's going to stop this historic run game that we've seen. Eventually, they're going to have to pass. But even still, with the simplicity in the passing game, like the calls and Hurts' issues, there's still too much talent for this to fail. Like, A.J. Brown's going to have one of those games eventually where he goes for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Devontae Smith is due for a breakout. Dallas Goedert, I feel like, has been making plays despite the inept nature of the passing game so far through 2 games. The Eagles have 183 net passing yards in the playoffs. The Packers have more net passing yards in the playoffs than Philadelphia does, and Green Bay got eliminated by Philadelphia last week. Like, this is a bad passing game, but still, I keep going back. I don't think it's going to matter until the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I agree with the issues on the passing game, although I don't feel as strongly about it this week as I did last week. Against the Packers last week, I was more concerned. I could kind of see it's snowing. You have the ability to break off these monstrous runs. Don't overthink it. Don't give the game away. I mean, they get 3 touchdown runs in this game of 40 plus yards, which is wild. Saquon Barkley becomes the first player this century to have 2 50-plus yard runs in a playoff game. I mean, 50-yard runs in a playoff game is incredible. So I kind of understood it from that perspective. And then he has the knee injury in the third quarter. So it's like, all right, at that point, I definitely don't want him dropping back. So I'm not saying that the pass issues are resolved. I just can kind of understand going into this game being like, don't make a lot of mistakes. Let them, turn the football over. Our defense is playing relatively well, and let's keep breaking off these explosives in the run game.
I feel like it's less about the volume and more about the fact that they lost 60 yards on sacks. Hurts had that's
a huge issue.
Hurts had 120 passing yards in this game, but you look at the box score and it was 60 net passing yards. That's the problem. That's the problem that's not going to show up in the box score. Like, you could look back at Hurts' last 2 games and read the box score and be like, oh, he played well, the traditional box score. But you have to add in the sack yards and you have to add in the turn downs. Like, yes, he's not turning over the ball, but at what expense? Like, what is he turning down to not turn over the ball? And it's passes downfield. Like, it's not impressive. It goes back to the training camp conversation with him where he wasn't throwing interceptions in training camp. And some people were like, is that a red flag? It's a red flag if there's no red flags. And it turns out that, it kind of is. Like, that wasn't a good sign. It kind of showed that he's a little hesitant to take some chances in this offense. I don't know if he's not fully comfortable in this. It's a new offense for the first time, like a new terminology and all that with Kellen Moore taking over. It's like a guy from outside the coaching tree that had been in there. So it would make sense. Maybe he takes a step next year. But I think that's more of the concern is the long-term ramifications for this, because you have invested so much money in this passing game and you're getting nothing out of it. You're getting nothing out of it because of the quarterback.
You know what's funny is that before the second half happened, if we would have podcasted then, I probably would have been giving Jalen Hurts a little bit more benefit of the doubt because I didn't think it was as bad. Like, you have the dropped A.J. Brown dig route, and then you have what would have been a big play to Devontae Smith on the design play action shot. He drops the ball but gets the helmet-to-helmet hit, right? And I think that probably is a play that they connect on more often than not, and had it not been for the illegal contact or the illegal hit there, you probably do haul that in. And then you have the A.J. Brown dropped go route up the right sideline in the second quarter. I think, to me, the biggest issue is and we rarely talk about this with quarterbacks. It usually goes in the other way, right? Like when you talk about Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, some of these other quarterbacks, they connect on a couple and then they think they're on a heater and then they make a mistake later on in the game because they feel like all the throws are there. I feel like Jalen's the exact opposite. And it was so predictable. You get the dropped A.J. Brown dig and then he drops the go. And it just felt like he said, oh, okay, well, every throw past the 6 is just not going to be there for me today. So I'm just not going to even take a chance with those passes. And then you think about how little he gives you in terms of evading pressure and extending plays when pressure is coming up the interior. I thought that Mekhi Becton was a problem in pass protection early in the game. There were a lot of slants and stunts that clearly bothered him. The Rams have a lot of smaller, quicker guys. Obviously for Becton, that's going to present some problems at times, especially if they're good with their hands. But for me, as Jalen Hurts, you have to have a better answer than just totally aborting the play and just falling down and giving up 8 to 10 yards, or making the play worse by trying to go out the back door of the pocket, and then your ball security is bad. Like Steven was pointing out, that turns him into the kind of quarterbacks that we mock when they were in the Shanahan and McVay, Kevin O'Connell system. And that's what he plays like. He plays like a backup in those systems where they're just telling the quarterback before they finish putting in the play call, hey, don't mess this up, please. If it's not there, just check it down. I'm giving you one look. If the one look's not there, just check it down, hold the ball, throw it away, take the sack, whatever. Jalen Hurts, for his skill set and what I know him to be capable of based off what we saw in 2022, and I'm not saying that he was an MVP level player there. He was just like a fringe good, legitimate good quarterback. I don't know how that skill set, which is not worsened over time in my opinion, is a mix with this decision-making. And now what we're looking at is a guy who's not even getting the best out of what he is physically, and he's not getting the best out of what the offense is presenting to him. And I think that there are issues within the design. There are just so many holes outside of the running game that I think can be a barrier to this team if they have to play the Bills or the Chiefs and they take a 2-score lead, or they're able to go possession for possession with you and you're looking up late in the fourth quarter and this might be the last time you touch the ball and you're going to have to pass in order to score and control the game. I don't know if I trust this team to win in those types of environments. I don't know if I trust them to beat Washington, who has proven that if you give them the football, they can get down the field and they're going to use all 4 downs to maintain possession. They're going to be dealing with bad matchups, I think, for the way that this offense likes to operate the rest of the way, and that's kind of concerning for me.
It's clear that after he turned the football over early in the season, the priority over everything else became don't turn the football over.
Yep.
And they kept winning. And they kept winning, and it kept getting hammered home. The team that makes the fewest mistakes is going to win the game. Nick Sirianni quotes that Bobby Knight thing over and over again. And that is absolutely how their passing game operates. Avoid turnovers at all costs. And it's like, should you be playing that way? Because we're not used to seeing NFL teams win that way. This is, if this was 20 years ago, when we were watching the game and analysts on TV were saying, run the football, don't turn it over, play good defense. The game has evolved, and no one really wins that way or plays that way anymore. Yet here they are, one game away from the Super Bowl. I mean, they had 65 net passing yards. That's their second lowest total in a game this century. That's the lowest passing yardage total for a team that has won a playoff game in the last 10 years. So even though I'm saying with the weather, I understand the way you played, we have seen other bad weather games, and no one has thrown for 65 net passing yards and still won a football game there. So they are a confounding team where the running game's incredible and they're breaking off these 50-yard runs, and the defense makes some plays there at the end, even though certainly the Rams got theirs. And the passing game, you don't trust it, yet they haven't lost a game that Jalen Hurts has started and finished since September. I think it's 12 in a row now, or 11 in a row. So we'll see. They get the Commanders next week. They're 4.5-point favorites in that game. Jaden Daniels comes back to Philadelphia for the 3rd time. All right, I want to take one more break. I want to come back and I want to talk about this Rams team. Where do they go from here? Because I don't want to say they should be as frustrated as the Ravens, but I think Sean McVay was probably pretty frustrated after that game. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. So the Rams, Saquon Barkley has the monster 70-plus yard touchdown run in the 4th quarter. The game seems over. Stafford just leads them right down the field. A minute 48, they score a touchdown. Defense gets a 3 and out. And all of a sudden, the Rams offense has the ball with a chance to win the game because of missed extra points by the Eagles. They're down 28-22. Puka Nacua, incredible catch down the right sideline in the snow. Beautiful. They get down to the 13-yard line, and they're unable to punch it in. Jalen Carter with a big sack there, and then Jalen Carter with a big pressure on 4th down. I was pretty impressed with this Rams team, honestly, today. Like, their pass rush showed up. Jared Verse said what he said, and then was like fantastic in this game. I mean, maybe the best performance by a defensive lineman against the Eagles all year, honestly. He was fantastic. Stafford in the snow played well. They had the 2 big turnovers in the second half where Jalen Carter punches the ball out from Kyron Williams, and then Matthew Stafford takes the sack fumble from Nolan Smith, and still they had a chance to win the game there at the end. So I kind of came into the playoffs, Ruiz, being like, I feel like this is the last run for Stafford and McVay. And I don't know, after the last 2 weeks, I'm kind of like, add a piece or two on both sides of the ball and run it back. And who knows what you look like next year. Where are you with this Rams team? How disappointed should they be? Where do you think they go from here?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they were clearly the inferior team here, like just on paper, looking at the depth charts. But I do think they played the Eagles to an even matchup. Like yards per play, they both averaged 5.7. The Rams had the higher success rate. They had a lower EPA average, but that was because of the turnovers. If they don't lose this turnover battle, they probably win the game. Like, even they got ran over by Saquon Barkley with those big runs, but a 40% success rate on the ground is the same that Los Angeles had against Philadelphia's defense. So they kind of came out even in that matchup too. But I think they just need to get this offensive line healthy, have that defense take another step forward, that young defense, after we saw the defensive line take some strides in the playoffs, especially, and then get this receiving core healthy. I don't know if like Cooper Kupp is past his prime. I think he probably is, but maybe if he's healthy for an entire offseason, he hasn't really had that for the last couple of years. Maybe he rejuvenates himself. So yeah, I don't think they're that far off, honestly, because Stafford's still playing at a high level. I saw some retirement talk, saw some talk about his contract and like how much it would cost to get out of it, but I don't see any reason to do that. I thought he was the best quarterback in the NFC all season long. And then I think you saw in this game that as long as you protect him and don't force him to move off his spot, he can give you a chance to win a football game, even against a top level defense in a scary environment in bad weather.
Go ahead, Diante.
I don't want to take the totally, I don't want to take the total pessimistic angle on this. I would say, though, going forward, unless they're able to bring in some big time skill position talent on offense, I think the face that's on the marquee is Sean McVay solo going forward. I don't think it's Sean McVay plus Matt Stafford in the years to come, just because of the issues with handling pressure.
That'll wrap it up for this episode of the Ringer NFL show. Thanks to everyone for watching on FanDuel TV or listening on Spotify. Thank you to Steven Ruiz. Thank you to Diante Lee. Appreciate Christopher Sutton for producing, Tucker Tashijan for all the video help, additional production supervision by Connor Nevins, Arjuna Ramgopal, and Dan Comer. I'm Sheil Kapadia. We'll talk to you next time later this week on the Ringer NFL show.